Welcome to another live stream, Organized Stalking, Patterns and Themes. You have to see the equation that you're dealing with as a targeted individual. And, for a lot of the new targets, it is something that is a mechanism that is used against them. It is a theme-based scientific equation axiomated around traumatic mind control and invasion of the psyche, along with other techniques that involve discrediting individuals, smear campaigns, triggering them using different schemes and theatrical setups to take them into a place where they, are isolated from not only just maybe their social circle, but their family. The dysfunction that is created through subjection of hostile, toxic environmental tyranny with the psychological motive behind it, involving themes and patterns. And I've mentioned before that when targets deal with that infiltration, they are using your psychological and physical mechanisms of survival against you. They are hijacking your mind. It seems primitive. I mean, it seems like you're just dealing with a bunch of buffoons who think they can play with your head, and maybe they are. I've talked about that there's a lot of ways that people can become involved. I'm not over glorifying what they're doing. I'm just saying the equation, whether it is some type of government, schematic, or whether it is a spiritual scenario, the whole idea of using it was very effective. The dysfunction that comes out of it is unexpected. When individuals are traumatized and attacked, when they are stalked and harassed, they become hypervigilant. They start looking for this stuff. They start processing information differently. They don't know who to trust. It's a spiral that can happen very quickly. And it's not to be underestimated. And like I said, when you're a new target, recognizing not only the patterns and the themes is very important, because you must know one thing, if nothing else, as a target: you are being manipulated. You are being played. They're trying to play you. They are literally invading your mind. They're trying to control the vector of your thought life, the trajectory of your hope and future plans, according to that pattern-based schematic of harassment that takes a person into the place, depending on what they want to do, internalized condemnation or just hopelessness, because the gaslighting is exponential. And when you deal with individuals who are exposed to sensitization and theme-based harassment, at first it's almost inevitable, unless they have information. That's why I put out these videos, that they're going to read into these things and they're going to come to conclusions, because it's like reverse psychology. All right, I've talked about how you could do this with probably just a lot less resources than people would imagine, involving synchronized attacks after learning the targeted individual's schedule. And the syllogistic conclusion that would come out of it would be that the whole city is in on it. There's millions of dollars being spent to harass me. And there's targets who are dealing with things like the demonic hive and with government programs. But my emphasis is not that that's not happening to you. My emphasis is this, that the equation that is used to invade your mind and to sensitize you and put you in a place where you are basically dealing with post-traumatic syndrome is something that involves patterns and themes. It's done with a motive. The first thing you have to realize after seeing what's really around you as a targeted individual, that the people, the I don't know, the conceptual framework that you were raised to believe is really subjectively there. Now, and I've mentioned that before, that there's a lot of people out there in the world that they don't know what's happening to you, right? Not everybody's in on this. It wouldn't work that way. There's a lot. And with the fact that these, at least in my opinion, are the end of the last days, meaning the end of the 2,000-year age of grace. According to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have entered into the final 50 years. Okay, whether that's correct or not, you think whatever you want. We're a year or two into that. And it makes sense when you look at what's going on, even when you see what targets are talking about being gang stalked in church and Acts 20:29, that wolves are going to come in, is that this world, if that's right, I'm not saying that it is, we'll say that it's correct. The Dead Sea Scrolls, they interpreted the coming of Christ a little differently, but it was exactly the same. But the thing is if that's correct, when that great and terrible day of the Lord comes, well, there's, the earth is going to be prepared for that whole thing. The takeover of the kingdom of darkness is going to be so exponential and so, the things are going to be so dark that individuals involved in the hierarchy of this world and so on and so forth, they're going to be completely unaware of what's about to happen. And when God pours out his wrath, he's going to be pouring it out on his enemies, right? And so when you see this whole thing going down, you see the evil, you see, these patterns, and you realize that exponentially, my point in bringing that up is that things are getting worse. They're not getting better. Okay. And so, being that, like I said, if I'm correct about that, you have the rise of technology, you have all these other things going on. You have projects like MK Ultra, Mockingbird, Project Phoenix, Artichoke. You have other things that people have uncovered that I can't really mention. And it all fits together. When people deal with harassment and their own family turns against them, you don't think that plays into that whole thing? Of course it does. In the days that we are living, this type of harassment is possible. Not only that, but it's becoming, something that a lot of people are talking about. There's a lot of individuals out there online that you never would have guessed that gang stalking was so prolific, but it is. And then when targets deal with this whole thing, when they start seeing it, one of the things that they finally realize, depending on how long they last, is there's quite a few people who know about this whole thing already. They might be mocking the target. They might be taunting them. They might be playing the little games of sensitization that, that triggers the target. But the thing that's undeniable is that it seems to be not only effective, not only scientific, but it seems to be something that can be activated against targeted individuals, people who are marked, depending on what it is, pretty much wherever they go. Now, the science that I illustrated earlier, if you had I don't know, a limited amount of resources and some intel on someone, well, you could set it up to where they could be traumatized to the point where they're processing information incorrectly. That's kind of my point. Not underestimating the science of gang stalking is that it is an invasion into your mind. Even if the target will say, has been attacked by, I don't know, maybe individuals who don't know exactly what they think they know. The sensitization is being used to create a labyrinthian effect. It would still illustrate how effective this whole thing is. And I've mentioned before that when you deal with new targets, one of the dangers is that when you try to talk to them, you're going to end up bringing up something that triggers them. Well, how'd you know about that? How'd you know about that? Well, everybody that's dealing with this is dealing with that. You're not unique. And I've mentioned that, some of the people involved in this dealing with the compartmentalized, individuals who are just maybe, I don't know, not really on the inside of it, but just used in that mechanism of gang stalking, they wouldn't really have to know that much about you. I've been accused of reading people's minds. I've been accused of spying on individuals just because of the things that I talk about on the show. Why? Because there's themes, there's patterns. And you have to see the scientific equation in order to hack this, in order to neutralize the effects of the manipulation, the gaslighting, the sensitization. You have to see what's going on. If you're a new targeted individual, sensitization involves a theme-based stimuli that comes at the target, depending on how they want to traumatize the individual, maybe with personal information, maybe they do other things, but they get their attention and they start using different themes, words, phrases, maybe different activities. A lot of targets will talk about things that trigger them that are involved with the perpetrators that sensitize them. And it's very traumatizing. But the thing is it creates plausible deniability to where these individuals can attack them in public. They can attack them, in the grocery store. They can attack them on a doctor visit. They can attack them in their workplace. They can harass them in a crowd full of people. And if you say anything, you just look like you're crazy. You start seeing these patterns. You start seeing these themes. And then it goes even further to where you have targets dealing, with that programming that before something that they would never have noticed becomes part of their salient landscape, and they start reading into it and assigning value and probably a whole lot more attention than is necessary. And I've mentioned that, using that example of someone who, walks in to the room and just starts spouting off things with a shotgun technique. Think of it right now for yourself. You can think of 3 things that targeted individuals deal with: voices, surveillance, I don't know, street theater, whatever. And all you'd have to do is walk into a room and start talking about these things loudly or in a group of people, or maybe even mention other things. A lot of targets deal with a smear campaign, right? Well, I think certain people should just be tortured. That applies to a lot of individuals, possibly, right? But do you need to have intimate knowledge? No. And I mentioned the example that, when targets start talking about this stuff, or they start to, become activists, maybe, holding a sign talking about, voice to skull technology. Someone sees that and they see you later, and, they could set it up to where you think they're part of it. They could walk into a restaurant that you're in and say, oh, at least I'm not hearing voices. But, the target isn't going to know because the environmental tyranny around them is so great. They're going to assume that these individuals, who knows, maybe they're working for the CIA, maybe they're working for the military or something, because they know, but they don't necessarily have to know, right? Targets are dealing with covert poisoning and drugging. They're dealing with V2K. They're dealing with directed conversations. People are breaking into their house. They're trying to gaslight them. They're sabotaging them. They're harassing them at work. They're surveilling them. There's all your themes right there. I know everything about you. No, right? No, of course I don't. And that's part of the neutralization technique that you need to understand, is that not only is this stuff come with a motive, but there's a method, and they use an equation. It's like controlled programming, right? Yeah, you can hack somebody's device or something like the video, the movie, the game, and literally communicate with someone. A lot of targets talk about how technology has been basically hidden behind closed doors, and they've had all these things, probably making deep fakes and stuff like that way back. Who knows? There's no reason to say that's not possible. That's a reasonable conclusion. But the theme-based harassment that you're dealing with is part of that equation. So when you're dealing with Operation Mockingbird, or you're dealing with disinformation, or you're dealing with ideological possession, whether it's, manipulating individuals to have a particular type of perception, or invading their mind and getting them to look for certain things, the patterns are going to be there for them to see, and they're going to come to conclusions. Why? Because it's based on manipulation, psychological manipulation, right? And they indoctrinate people in different types of philosophy, along with perceptual, ideas that get them into that place where they can be manipulated. It's like reverse psychology. Individuals that are provoked into riots, individuals that are provoked into gang stalking targeted individuals, right? The mob mentality, how people act differently within that framework, or they start to role play, right? With the Stanford experiment or other things. How you look at some of the war criminals that were involved in killing and annihilating the Jews, and when they caught these people, they were just regular individuals who, they were just following orders. The monsters among us and targeted individuals know all of them, because depending on what's going on, anyone can become one of them. That's the sad truth about being a target, especially if you're dealing with harassment from family members. You didn't think they'd ever turn against you. What about a good friend? What did they tell them? What happened? Were they playing you all along? You don't know, right? Dealing with the controlled programming as an example of theme-based harassment, they can just put people out there to act strange or say certain things, or other different types of themes that can be within, broadcasts, not only to indoctrinate people, but maybe even to trigger them. Things that you wouldn't notice before, right? And then the target believes that the TV is watching them, or the people in the news studio are in on it, or their neighbors are there. They're hearing V2. It's all manipulation. A lot of these things are theme-based illusions, and you have to realize that it should lighten the load for some of the people out there who are dealing with these things, because the whole idea that targets deal with is everybody's watched it. They're in the Truman Show. Everybody knows. They all know. No, they don't. And even if they do have some of the information, you're still playing a game. And even if they are sold out completely, and not even, dealing with that compartmentalized thing. There are people who have intimate knowledge of what's going on, and some of those perps know exactly what they're doing. Well, they're eventually going to be judged. They're eventually going to pay for that whole thing. You win either way. The fact that you're not an aggressor, the fact that you are a targeted individual, you realize that that's actually a blessing. It doesn't feel like it. How cold and calloused would you have to be to go to bed tonight knowing that you ruined someone's life and pushed them possibly in a trajectory of destruction and suicide or something like that? They do it. The calloused nature of these individuals who do these things, the recklessness of this is exponential. I'm going to go ahead and put a link in here. And see if anyone else wants to come in here. Like I said, it's going to be a little quicker of a live stream. Maybe we'll go the full hour. But for new targets out there, you have to realize what you're dealing with concerning this theme-based menagerie. These patterns that keep coming up for targeted individuals. Because it's a scientific equation. You have to look at it like math. It's like dealing with a math equation. You have the foreplay, you have the setup, you have the false conceptual framework, you have the reality flip, you have the subjection to trauma, you have the destabilization of the target, you have the themes introduced through sensitization, and then you have all the manipulation and gaslighting that come out of it, taking them into dysfunction, isolation, and psychosis, or reprogramming them, or making them, the Manchurian candidate or whatever. I'm going to see what's out there in the comments. Oh, Lord, be a lamp under my feet. Welcome to the live stream. Okay. Here's something interesting. I think I got this right. Lord be a lamp unto my feet says, what about the secret competition going on? It's weird. People competing against targets while they are being harassed and God knows what. Well, so I think what you're, and I could be wrong, and you could come in and hit the link if you want. I think what you're dealing with there, and what I've noticed, and maybe I'm wrong about it, is that it's the game dynamic, right? Somehow, at least in your scenario, you're doing the right thing, and they're doing the wrong thing, but they're competing against you, and somehow that is supposed to be, it's supposed to be meaningful. I don't know. Because I've run into that too, to where it's like they're all competing against targeted individuals in the sense that they're in rebellion and you're not, and you didn't conform or whatever. And let's see how that works out for you. I don't know if that's exactly what you're talking about or not. But if it is, I've seen that before. We do have someone in here, and I hit the link, so I'm going to go ahead and let you in. No swearing? Welcome to the live. How are you tonight?
I'm all right. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you.
So I have 26-year history of gang stalking here. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have of me in terms of the subjective experience. But I'll tell you that I have a lot in common with a lot of people who've been on your show. There is way more in common among us than there is unique in this experience. And you've done a really good job of describing it as environmental tyranny. It's really amazing to me the degree to which they can completely change your world. I mean, the color palette, the vibe, everything changes. I've had it all over the years. All of the gaslighting and the street theater, the directed conversation, the bizarre tonal shifts in the atmosphere when you step out the door, the constant mobbing. There's no way to go to the store without being completely mobbed by these people. It's an amazing system, really, and I don't know how I've survived 26 years of it, other than going for long periods of time, stretches of time where I just simply tune it out, and that seems to negate some of its impact. But it's hard to when they are constantly mobbing me. But I wanted to come on and share that with anybody who's experiencing this and has any doubts about whether or not it's actually happening. The difficulty is describing it to anyone else in a way that doesn't subject you to the risk of being labeled mentally ill. Which is a very real risk in this environment. It seems to be part of the way the program is built, that your complaints are going to fall on deaf ears, and ultimately your complaints are the reaction that they're looking for. I've become an advocate, really, of the idea that remote neural monitoring is actually here and has been here for some time, and that it's a technology that has kind of gone rogue, and that people are using it, all kinds of people, whether they be governmental or executive branch, legal, the police state, or private individuals, criminals, are using that technology to oppress people and torture people and traffic people. This is like a human trafficking operation. And there's no question that they enlist the help of the neighbors in this environment. David Lawson wrote an amazing book years ago called Terrorist Stalking in America. And it's an accurate explanation and description of the same types of things we're still experiencing decades later. I don't know when that book was published, but 26 years ago when this started for me, I had very little information available to me to try and suss out what was going on in my environment. There's a lot more now. And it seems to me that it's only a matter of time before it becomes mainstream knowledge that these programs exist. But I keep telling myself that, and nothing has changed in 26 years of gang stalking. So,
let me ask you this. Let me ask you, you said, you want me to ask you a question. Being a 26-year veteran, well, you said there's a lot of themes and patterns, which of course that's kind of the whole show there. But one of the things that I've noticed with targets, and because you've been doing this for so long, you can answer this question. And I've experienced this. A lot of other targets will talk about it, that it switches on and off. You mentioned constant subjection. And so has it ever stopped for you? And if it has, for how long? Have they tried to gaslight you with that on and off methodology, or has that even been part of your stalking?
no, I do think that there's an ebb and flow to this, that they can intensify the program to, step up their game, depending on how resistant you are to certain stimuli that they put in your environment. But, so yeah, I do. But then again, I do think a lot of it has to do with your ability to tune out the stimuli so that you aren't reacting to it. If you're not aware of it, then it's not happening, and you're not reacting to it in any.
Let me specify, because that doesn't always happen that way. A lot of times the techniques are very subtle. Maybe that's what you're dealing with when you're talking about sudden, or constant subjection. Let me ask you this: have you dealt with very aggressive covert poisoning, break-ins, voices, anything like that?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
and that's happened a number of times over the years, and it's very frustrating. And it's one of the reasons why I think targets become isolated. They get afraid to leave the premises or their house because they're afraid of what happens when they're away. And
Okay.
trying to figure out a way to bug my own apartment to detect the presence of an intruder when I'm out is can be confounding. Any device I've ever purchased for the purpose of recording anything that happens in my apartment when I'm not in it has fallen under, some type of planned obsolescence or malfunction. I mean, nothing, the technology, they hack, man, their hacking skills are unbelievable. How adept they are at insinuating themselves into your electronic devices. It's really difficult to get anything over on them.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I brought that up is because you mentioned concept subjection and tuning them out. And I thought, well, there are certain things that targets deal with that are pretty hard to tune out. And I didn't know if you were experiencing the aggressive stuff. That's why I brought that up, because when, some people hear that, they're like, well, if somebody's breaking into your house, that's pretty hard to tune out. Or if you're hearing voices, that's pretty hard to tune out. Or people are doing fuming or other things. That's not something that an individual can necessarily tune out. But there are other things that you can, like directed conversations or street theater, or people trying to trigger you, or the patterns and other things. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes,
when you
tune that out.
began,
And I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm
no, go
sorry to
ahead.
interrupt, but while I'm thinking about it, one of the things that's near impossible to tune out, at least I haven't figured out a way yet, is the noise campaign. The noise harassment can be very intense and very spooky, very otherworldly in the way it presents, and that is problematic, because if you're trying to get sleep and somebody's in the loading zone underneath your apartment on the street, revving their engine at the moment that you're drifting off to sleep, and that same or somebody else's car is revving their engine the moment that you wake up in the morning, it becomes pretty oppressive. The sleep deprivation is debilitating. It's debilitating. It's hard to avoid the noise campaign, and they will come at you from all angles. I live in an apartment building, a subsidized apartment building for low income seniors. So it's like a captive audience. But I got to tell you, the landscape has completely changed up here on my floor over the last year that I've been in this apartment. The neighbors, I don't recognize any of these people. I installed a video doorbell. I've got 150 contacts a day walking by a video doorbell in a retirement building of low-income people. It's unbelievable. The traffic has become insane. And I've put together little montages. I uploaded one to my YouTube channel the other day, but nobody really looks at my YouTube channel. But it's amazing what goes on the other side of that. I think the doorbell's been a bit of a mixed blessing, to be honest with you. I think it's more of a curse. I'd rather not know. It makes it hard to ignore what's actually going on out there.
Yeah, right.
Because they'll make with the street theater right in front of that thing. They know it's a damn camera, and they'll go and they'll have these long conversations or act out.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And then of course I've got to spend hours sussing it all, parsing through this stuff. It's a nightmare. I mean, you're better off avoiding and ignoring.
No, you're making a great point, because there's so much plausible deniability around this stuff. Is that how much time are you going to dedicate? You already know what's going on, right?
Oh yeah. So, of course I do. Yeah. I've lived this. I have lived this, and everything I'm experiencing, I've got in common with a lot of people, down to the color palette that they use when they're stalking you with vehicles. I mean, they will change your landscape. It will become white, gray, black, and red and blue, and that's it. That is the whole color palette of my life when they turn the gas on. It's incredible to me.
Let me ask you something more specific. Now, we are dealing with patterns and themes, and a lot of targets, deal with disinformation. But I'm going to be more specific concerning the directed conversations. What kind of themes have you noticed within your 26 years of harassment that involve those directed conversations?
Oh, it's more things that they say that are designed to let you know that they are watching and that they're aware of what you're doing. And it doesn't matter. It's usually very mundane. Like the other day, I'm at the deli counter ordering food, and there's a woman doing the thing with her cell phone. You know, like they'll videotape. I'm the most photographed person in my neighborhood. I'm incredibly good for the local economy. I get swarmed when I go out. And I'm at the
Wow.
deli counter. I order my food. I spot her doing that thing with the phone where she pretends like she's talking on the phone, but she's obviously making a video because she's orienting herself in a way where the lens is pointed straight at me. And she's talking out loud and faking this conversation about the exact thing that I have just ordered at the deli. And it's mundane shit like that. Like you said, sorry for the swearing.
Yeah.
But it's just designed to let you know that they are watching you. And what they'll do is they populate your world with everything that they know freaks your shit out. Excuse my language. But there are, specific things that they can do that have plausibility, plausible deniability built right into them. And it's just 1,000 little tiny insults that add up to this environment that's so oppressive and so dark, and at times it can feel so hopeless and so isolating that you can't describe it in any other way besides torture. I mean, it is a modern day, and I know it's not actually modern day. It's been going on for, I don't know how long this has been going on, but probably hundreds of years that these techniques, the Stasi, the hand signs, the gang signs are just, incredibly important to the way they present to themselves and each other and you. I mean, they're not just used to signal each other. They're used to signal to you, to let you know that they exist and that they are watching you. It's crazy how important that is. And they do it out in front of God and everybody, and nobody reacts and nobody else can see it. It's like nobody else has eyes to see.
Yeah, that's the plausible. Let me ask you something else, because as a 26-year veteran, you have a lot of experience, and one of the things that really disturbs targets, especially individuals who've experienced the intense stalking and harassment that you have, is the infiltrators, or maybe family members or something like that, or honeypots or something in that arena. And so, are you in the place where you have any relationships, or is it all just? I mean, have you been isolated like most targets?
I have, but I've had relationships through the years. I come from a large family with a lot of siblings, and I still have relationships with my siblings, but I don't live near any of them. So I am somewhat isolated. And my relationships with family members have been problematic over the years, in part because of my inability to describe to them what I'm experiencing, because of the natural skepticism that this whole idea, that you're presented with when you try to explain what's happening in your life to somebody else. The human mind rebels against the idea that programs like this exist. And I understand why it's so difficult to get anyone else to see what I see when I look out the window. And so I think
Even if they knew, it would they don't want to admit it because it destroys their peace, right?
right. Yeah, the human mind is repulsed by the idea that gang stalkers and gang stalking exists, that this level of cruelty can be inflicted wantonly, sanctioned by the state. I mean, there's law enforcement and emergency services are clearly involved. They're clearly complicit. They make it known that they are involved and complicit. They have their own little role to play in the game. I've watched a fair amount of other YouTubers document their experience, and many of them are have LE and emergency services are involved in their stalking. It's obvious. It's obvious to the targeted individual. The challenge is convincing anybody else that it's happening. It sounds like a paranoid delusion. I mean, it's tailor-made to fit the DSM-10 or whichever edition they're on now for the symptomology of schizophrenia and, mental illness, delusional paranoias and things like that. When there's a rational basis for symptoms like this. I mean, they're literally using these neuroweapons to, voice of God, the whole schlemiel. There's a YouTuber named Lookout for Charlie. Just a little plug for him real quick. I don't know if that's against the rules. I apologize if it is.
Yeah, we don't want to mention channels, but go ahead.
Okay, he's just done an amazing job of documenting this technology over the years, and I just wanted to give him a shout out. That's a resource that I found very helpful. I have found your channel extremely helpful. You're remarkably consistent in terms of how you describe this phenomenon. I can only assume that you have legitimately been through this and that you are a targeted individual. And you're very prolific also. I see you do live stream a lot, and I appreciate that. I've never really talked publicly about this. This is the first time I've ever really come out.
Well, that's good because that's why we do this stuff anonymously. As you already mentioned, that it works against the target because the mechanism is to discredit you. And there's the two individuals or groups, out there, the people who know who are going to laugh and try to trigger you, and the individuals who have no idea. And there's really no way to win within that concerning the dilemma that you're in, And so let me ask you this, because as a 26-year veteran, you said you've dealt with a lot of environmental tyranny. You've dealt with the hacking of your devices, neural monitoring, at least from your point of view. Have you noticed anything spiritual involved in what you're dealing with, or is that something that's not involved in your concept of gang stalking?
Well, I'm unfortunately for me, I think this is to my detriment that I don't. I lost my religion some years ago. I was raised in a large Catholic family. My mom and dad were divorced when I was a kid, and my mom stopped going to the church, and so I kind of lost my religion when I was a young kid, and never really got it back. So I'm not a particularly spiritual person, and I've looked for more scientific and technical explanations for a lot of the symptomology, but it's hard to escape the more you look at the totality of this program and become aware that it's not a localized phenomenon. This is global. I am living a very similar experience to somebody in Canada or Germany. I don't think there's any place on the globe that does not have documented cases of gang stalking and this kind of harassment. So I'm sorry if I forgot the question.
No, you're fine. You're not looking at the spiritual dimension at all, and you're looking at
Here's what I wanted to say. Here's what I wanted to say on that subject. I think I've come to the conclusion that this is bigger than a government or a law enforcement department or the Department of Homeland Security or whichever three-letter agency you want to talk about. This seems satanic. As somebody who is not particularly religious or spiritual, it fits this layman's definition or description of what somebody like me would commonly refer to as satanic. And that transcends, governments and politicians and institutions, and it is a satanic phenomenon.
Yeah, Well, that's kind
so
of what
there's
I'm
only, I
getting at.
mean,
I didn't know.
is there any anecdote to that? That, I mean, you're not going to find any anecdote to that in a governmental or religious well, you will probably find an antidote to it in a religious institution, and whether it's Christianity or any other. um, I don't know if it's Christianity, but I think a relationship with Jesus and God is probably going to be one of the only avenues of salvation for TIs, because I don't see any way out of this. I'm a 26-year, veteran that can testify to how persistent, how unbelievably persistent this is, and how resistant it is to any efforts that you make as a targeted individual to make it stop. You can ignore it. You can become so boring that they don't want to mess with you as much anymore. But it's almost like you're never going to escape it. And the concept of privacy is gone, and that you forsake that, and that you live a life that is free of any type of entanglement or activity that could be construed in any way aside from being morally and godly right.
Let me
That's
ask
the
you this,
only.
William.
That's the
Yeah,
only way that I can think to live that is going to bore the shit out of these people, because they love the torture part. They love inflicting the pain. They
they're
love it.
sadistic. They are very
Yes.
sadistic.
Oh yeah.
Some of them, they don't react that way, and it's almost like they're doing it reluctantly. But
Yes.
you don't know if they're trying to gaslight you or not, because it's almost like they're trying to get your attention at that point.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell that some people have been they're reluctant. They're playing their part, but they're not doing it with a lot of enthusiasm.
No, they yeah, exactly. It's a bit contradictory. Yeah.
And my heart goes out to the perps, by the way. I've come to the conclusion that most of them, are between the devil and the deep blue sea, and that they're under the influence of the machines also, and that they're well aware of what could happen to them if they decline to participate on whatever level they're being asked to participate. But I got to tell you, these community watchdog groups, these community groups, these neighborhood watch people, it's completely out of control. It's completely out of control. I mean, when they have fallen victim to the defamation and smear campaign that's being conducted. You had a guest on yesterday, I think, a young woman, and she was very articulate, and everything that she said rang so true. And she was talking about what it means to move, for a TI to move to a new place and to enjoy a certain kind of, calm and peace before the machine picks up, and the neighborhood starts to change. The people, your next door neighbors, it's like a deck of shuffled cards. And then the oppression starts. The environmental tyranny, thank you for the phrase, begins, and it won't let up. They want you out. These people want you the hell out of their neighborhood, and they'll do whatever it takes over time to freak your business out, so that you get
They're very hostile. Some of these people let you know that there's an emotion behind their activity.
Yeah, they're hostile, but they're carrying their own load. A lot of people in my building are in not good shape. I myself have had some serious health problems. I've had 2 blood cancers. I survived a stem cell transplant, and I spent most of last October in a hospital. And I survived non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 20 years ago, when this all started for me. 5 or 6 years into it, I got sick with cancer, chemo, radiation, the whole thing. And then 2 years ago, I come up with leukemia here. and, fail the oral treatment, end up in a hospital, stem cell transplant. I mean, I've got a transplanted immune system. Whatever the hell they've done to me over time has been pretty debilitating in terms of my health. But I'm still kicking, thank God.
Wow,
But,
amazing.
I mean, I have been through the ringer. And I mean, for anybody who thinks that this is, a temporary thing, I'm here to tell you they can long term. This is a long game that they're playing. And, so far I'm still standing. I wouldn't say I'm winning the game. Quite honestly, I'm pretty isolated right now.
Well, wait a minute now, because winning what game? Now that's gaslighting. Because of course you're winning, because you're not one of them. Absolutely, you're winning.
And
Yeah.
I think that's the dividing line between a TI and a perp, quite frankly, is that I've never met a lot of TIs, but I've networked online a little bit with a few. And mostly what I kind of gather is that the dividing line is between somebody who would act as a perp and those who would not. If you would decline to join there, in a group that harasses someone, a stranger in your neighborhood, if you are easily convinced that you should be participating in that type of behavior and activity, then if you decline to do something like that, you're at risk for being targeted. And I just think that's where the dividing line is. No target I've ever networked with struck me as somebody that would take up arms against a neighbor for no good reason on the basis of a dubious defamation campaign.
Right. But you have a lot of experience, and you said that you spent quite a bit of time in the hospital. Did you experience gang stalking while you were there?
Oh yeah, they picked up the game in my hospital.
Oh,
I mean,
my gosh. Tell us about that, because that's horrifying. Yeah.
They have. I went in to have my PICC line removed a few weeks ago, just recent history. And I swear to you, they substituted saline or lidocaine or saline for lidocaine in the numbing agent that they used before they ripped that tube out of my chest. They just ripped it out without, and I had this nurse seriously gang stalking the F out of me.
What? Tell me a little bit about that, because this stuff happens to me. I've seen it, but what happened?
Well, they do this behind a privacy curtain. They do it right in a suite. They don't take you to the ER. They're just going to numb you up locally. So there's a curtain that they can draw, right? Yeah. And I've got this nurse, and he is hyper focused on me. He will not stop looking at me. And I know, I get that feeling. My spidey sense starts tingling. I know damn well they're present, because they've been in taking pictures of me and crowding me and doing the hand gestures, all of the hand signs over the last couple of weeks.
You've been mentioning the hand signs. That's interesting. What kind of hand signs are you talking about?
Well, they do this. These hand signs are pretty consistent in my experience in terms of the thing that makes them unique is that they're synchronized. They make these signs in response to when you turn your eye to them or when you turn a lens on them. I roll a lot of video, doctor. I roll a lot of video.
Okay.
And you turn a lens on these people and their hands come up. Their hands go up to their nose, to their ear, to their hair, sometimes to their hips. There's a pulling up their pants motion that they do. There's pointing, a very deliberate pointing type of gesture that they make.
Okay.
But these gestures are very common. But the thing that makes them unique is the way that they are synchronized to the presence of a lens or your eyes. This is a line of sight type of operation that they're operating. So they will stay in your line of sight. They will put things and people in your line of sight in a way.
They try to get your attention first before they do it. Yeah,
Yeah, they
right.
do it, and they do it. The psychological impact of that is that they'll pack as many people or vehicles between you and the horizon as they possibly can. And it makes your world look like there's no way out. There's
Right.
no path that you can, there's no path that you can take that you will not meet some obstacle, some person, some dog walker, some car with tinted windows, some man in black lurking in the background. I mean, that it's a line of sight type of intimidation.
There's no escape. It's like
There's
you're in
no
a
escape.
matrix. Yeah.
Every crosswalk will have somebody in it. When I arrive at an intersection, that crosswalk on all four sides is going to be populated more often than not. And I mean, there at the beginning of my targeting, when I first started, when I became conscious of this, there had to be a period before it when they were doing all of their covert studying, because when it dawned on me, when it became obvious, there was no way to get away from these people. I would drive my car out to the Delta on a Sunday afternoon, trying to escape the gaze of a human being. And it was near impossible. These people would meet me at a desolate intersection in the middle of the afternoon on the Sacramento Delta. Just their timing and their ability to do this is uncanny, to the point that I'm starting to think it's literally a matrix, like a VR simulator, a literal virtual reality game that is creating these images. I think there's eye tracking. I truly believe that there's eye tracking has been installed, and that they don't need microphones or cameras to surveil you. I think that there's direct neural monitoring going on, that they can see what I see, they hear what I hear, they can sense, they can touch what I touch, and they can impose all of those sensations on me and back to me in a type of heterodyne loop. And I understand how completely esoteric and crazy that sounds, but I've struggled for so long to try and understand how they can so thoroughly corrupt an environment that all I have to do is look out the window, and I have conjured 6 or 8 of these sons of bitches at any hour of the day. Any hour of the day, I can create them out of seemingly nothing. They come out of nowhere.
What's the longest that you've gone without any of this environmental tyranny? Because it sounds like you've dealt with, everything from traffic to, I mean, it seems constant. But if you have had it stop, how long has that been? Because a lot of targets, when you're dealing with the gaslighting of this whole thing, and I've talked about that before, when people ask me, well, doc, I think this has stopped for me. Should I go ahead and go to college or do this, do that, and the other? And I'm like, well, you might want to wait a specific amount of time. And so your input is important, because you're dealing with maybe 3 weeks, 3 days, 3 months, 3 years. What have you experienced within that time frame?
It's difficult to.
In other words, have you had more than like 3 days or 3 weeks without it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
okay.
I'm retired now, so I have fewer opportunities to. I have fewer responsibilities now, so I'm more vulnerable, I think, as a retired person in my living situation than I would be if I were engaged in a full-time job.
Okay, so you're talking about being isolated and not having symptoms. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you experiencing a change in the environment when you go out in public for a specific period of time. Because I've had it happen for years before, where
Yes.
they'll change it.
Right.
So it does. I mean, there was even a time where I could go to restaurants, and it sounds crazy, and I
Yes.
would experience food tampering, and no, everybody was normal, and then
Right.
it just at one point it just everybody flipped, and it was you couldn't go anywhere, and so how long? Because I've told targets, and here's my point. If you're dealing with heavy harassment and you can't even get 3 days worth, don't expect 3 weeks. If you can't get
Right.
3 weeks worth, don't expect 3 months. If
No.
because the thing is that these people, who are dealing with this stuff, a lot of times the tyranny is such that is even the directed conversations and the gaslighting moves into areas of accusation to where, well, why don't you go to college? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? But if you can't have a certain period of time of relaxation without being traumatized, there's no point. There's no point in it. Right.
Yes, that's a very it's a very hopeless scenario that you're describing, and I
Well,
think it's
how long have you
there
experienced
have
that?
been
Yeah.
periods of years that I have been relatively symptom free, let's put it that way, but it's hard to determine.
That's important. That's important to notice because a lot of people are just going to say this guy's crazy and he's just reading into everything, but it's not because it stopped. And if it
Yeah.
was a true hallucination and mental disorder, it never would have.
Well, I
Right.
think part of it is lifestyle. Like there were a period of years where I was very busy. I was working in medical. This all happened when I was at the top of my game professionally. I'm a well-educated man. I was working a very well-paying medical device sales job in Northern California when this all hit the fan. And but I had a life that included a lot of moving around and interacting with a lot of different people and a lot of different challenging environments that, it would be a very hard person to pin down in a situation like that. And it immunizes a person somewhat from the targeting if you are actively engaged with your fellow man in some type of productive activity. But I was working hard and I was making a lot of money, and was really kind of, like I said, at the top of my game when this started. But I persevered and I thrived nonetheless for a number of years, where I was relatively harassment free. But again, I'm not saying that those weren't some very challenging years.
How many years are you talking about?
Oh, probably I did 10 years at one company and 6 years at another company, and was productive and effective,
So you
in
didn't
all of those
experience the
years.
sabotage at that time.
In spite of the sabotage, and in spite of the fact that it started to happen in the earlier years of my sales career. But I do think that the professional experience immunized me and protected me somewhat, and enabled me to insulate myself somewhat from the effects of the harassment. But there
Okay.
were periods of semi-employment or underemployment that were between those two stints where they picked up their game, and my hands were idle, and I was in a vulnerable position. I ended up having a child. In spite of not wanting to, I got honeypotted. Next thing I knew, I've got a kid. She's 20 years old now. And she's lovely, but I was at a point in my life where I knew better than to try and bring somebody into this world. I knew it was corrupt at the point where she came along, and that changed my game too. It put me in a place to where I had to, get serious about providing for her mom. Her mom was not capable of doing that. So I kind of ended up.
Did you share this with that individual? Because obviously you'd
Yes,
been
I did. And she used
okay.
it against me in a protracted custody battle. It lasted many years and cost me several hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was very expensive, very stressful, very, troubling time in my life to have to fight for my daughters, for the right to, for my parental rights, for my rights as her father, in the face of this defamation and smear campaign, to which no small part was waged by the baby mother. So, that was another reason for me to buck up and persevere and tune these bastards out. And that was pretty, that's an effective way to mute the impact of this program, is to, I don't know how else to describe it, is to fight for your right to not let people take your rights away, whether they be your parental rights or your freedom to go through a day with a private thought or walk to the market without getting mobbed. It's a tremendously oppressive environment. But there's ways for you to mute the impact of it. To anybody who's listening that's experiencing this and is dealing with all the doubters and the haters and the people who are trying to put you on a 72-hour hold, you just have to you have to bear it. I don't know how else to do it. But,
well, the reason
God,
the reason I brought that up is because, for someone who has postulated within the logistical conundrum that you were dealing with, you said that the environmental tyranny is exponential to the point where in neural monitoring has become, part of the landscape that you have, used to interpret what you're dealing with. And so for you to have a break in your harassment is significant, because you're talking about technology that not only is constantly surveilling you, but influencing people around you. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. I believe that this is
at least within the hypothetical view of that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think as a lay person, somebody with a non-technical background, all I can do is describe.
Okay, I just wanted to make a point. Why do you think they backed off? Why do you think they let you at least accomplish those years that you were able to tune them out or whatever? I mean, was it voices? I mean, was it? I mean, how much how much environmental tyranny are you talking about?
The noise campaign, it can be very oppressive. And there's another neuro weapon that I think is pretty esoteric, but I'm convinced that they have one with capabilities that include essentially vibrating. It's like they can vibrate any part of your anatomy at a very rapid pace, and they can, if they pump up the power on that, if they put a few more watts behind it, they can create pulsed type of speech, like human body communication. This rattle your bones, rattle your flesh in a way that can disturb your ability to get any kind of sleep or rest, but also can make you hear things. I mean, this technology can speak to you like pulsed robot vocoder type of speech by rattling your guts and, vibrating your guts and pulsing speech.
So you can actually identify the mechanism within this physical menagerie of symptoms that you're dealing with.
They can shape the foundations with one of these ELF generators. If they put enough watts behind those, they can literally find, a harmonic or a resonant frequency in your building and rattle your bed. I mean, it feels like a minor. It feels like an earthquake.
Yeah. No, a lot of times I've experienced those things too. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And they'll point it right at your body. It will rattle your guts. It's like when your stomach starts talking to you, but I mean like really talking to you. It's crazy. And There's no way to describe that, right, without sounding like a nut job.
Well,
But
no, there's this proven. I mean, there's technology out there that they're using to control riots. Same thing.
yes,
Yeah.
one of the other channel
We don't want to mention
creators
any
that
other
I won't
channels.
mention,
Yeah, don't do it.
talks about this weapon and its ability to ride up like almost like ducking software. If you've ever used a compressor, an audio compressor, the way that they work to normalize the volume of something by grabbing onto an audio signal and clamping down on it. You can hear that as an artifact in some recordings where compressors are used. And I can hear, like I said, I've done a lot of videotaping. I've listened and reviewed a lot of my own video and audio tapes. And I can hear that weapon being used, actually piggybacking sound that exists in my own environment, whether it's the fan of a compressor on the refrigerator or the scraping of my foot against a piece of fabric. Any sound that I can generate in my environment when this weapon is being deployed is going to generate this kind of phantom pulsing vocoder style voice is going to run up and glom onto that sound. And it's a very, very strange effect. When it glitches and you can hear it glitching, it's a
So
very...
what you're describing is a type of inroad into the individual's mind through a
Right.
type of resonance.
Yes, like a subliminal subaudible speech that's happening at a very, very low volume.
They're just hijacking the vibrational environmental stimuli to get in there. Yeah.
Yes, they're hijacking whatever frequency they're delivering. It's probably some very low frequency that's impossible to block. That they're essentially, multiplexing other frequencies on top of that and delivering it with a certain amount of power to your locale, and it's enabling a microwave auditory effect or something to that effect. It's a voice of God weapon similar to that described by Woody Norris in some of those videos. If you look for that name, he's the inventor, one of the inventors of the voice of God weapon that was deployed in Iraq, and he's made himself quite wealthy selling those to the American military. I believe that technology has probably gotten loose. It's in the hands of, it's available to the highest bidder on the dark net, and that there's people piling on people like me who have been targeted for this type of harassment. And however long...
Let me ask you, because you've dealt with some extensive electronic harassment and environmental tyranny. And what about the food tampering? What have you experienced there?
Oh, a number of food poisoning sporadically. I've had some challenges with the stem cell transplant and the chemotherapy that comes along with that over the recent years. I'm less than 200 days out right now from that transplant, and so there's been a lot of nausea and a lot of food, issues. But I've had bouts of what rather extreme, like gastroenterological symptoms as a result of chemotherapy.
Well, I'm not, that could be explained away, but the point is 26 years of dealing with harassment. You never dealt with that at restaurants where people were obviously messing with you. That's not something that was part of your harassment.
Well, I think I'm naive, and I think I'm a naive person who just assumed that wasn't happening to me. I've become a lot more careful. I went through a period of time 6 or 8 years ago where I became hyper vigilant around food, and was buying a lot of food in single serving packages and sealed packages.
Well, okay, but why were you doing it? That's what kind of what things happened to make you do that?
Well, there were break-ins in the place that I was living in.
Okay, well, that's important to know because you can't
Yeah,
leave that
there were
information out.
break-ins. I mean, on 3 different occasions. I used to be a working musician. You know, when you go to a lounge or a restaurant or a craft brewery and there's a guy in the corner with a guitar singing and,
Yeah,
doing
no,
background music,
that's
that was
interesting.
me.
Yeah.
That was
Okay.
me not that long ago, to be honest with you, before I got sick again. Um, so I would be out for, long hours from the middle of the afternoon until after midnight, doing my thing, making music. And I came home on 3 different occasions. On one occasion, the garage door was wide open and the door between the garage and the kitchen was unlocked. And one night I came home, the front door was wide open. I mean, wide open, and the lights were on inside. And on another occasion, I came home and the door to the garage, not the garage door, but the door on the side of the garage, was literally off of its hinges, wide open and off of its hinges. Is like, so I knew that somebody was coming and going. There was some gaslighting going on, things that were disappearing and then reappearing in other places, just weird shit like that. The dials on my stereo, I'm really particular about audio. I know exactly how they're set. I'd come home and they would be whacked out. And, it wasn't
Well,
like I
you
was.
didn't experience any directed conversations involving giving you cancer, poisoning. You said you got the single serving packets. So you obviously, because of the break-ins, yeah, you're going to be wondering, well, what the hell are they doing in here? Right.
Oh
But
yeah, I
was
became
there
pretty
any,
hyper vigilant.
was there any suggestion within the criteria of the show is theme based or patterns involving anything that would within the directed conversations that involve that stimuli that you dealt with?
Not that I remember. That's
Okay.
not to say they didn't happen.
Okay.
But I know that food tampering does become a concern at some point to a lot of TIs. I mean, I certainly went through that phase myself. I was very particular and very careful about what I ate. And then I got to the point where I was like, man, I don't want to live like this. I want a burrito from the, from the taco truck down the street. And, I was willing to run the risk that somebody was messing with my food because I wanted a damn burrito. So, at some point,
So it
I
wasn't very obvious in your scenario.
not terribly.
Okay.
No, not to me. And I think a lot of it it could be that I was experiencing a lot of it, but just wasn't aware of it, wasn't tuned into the possibility or the fact that it was going on.
Were you dealing with any threats in the direct conversations of mental institutions or anything like that? Any kind of, a very aggressive conversations involving that?
No, but my most recent girlfriend, not long after we started dating, went off into a couple of episodes that where she self-reported and self-committed to a 72-hour hold, and there was a lot of conversation at that time that seemed like it could have fit into that category.
Conversation
Because
with her?
yes, and there's some question in my mind at some point, whether or not I've been honeypotted by her, because some of her behavior was overtly stalker type of behavior, and but she's had some issues with substance abuse, alcohol abuse. Basically, she's had some drinking problems, and a rather volatile type of personality that I could see was struggling psychologically and emotionally. And any attempt that I made.
Did she ever, this is interesting. Did she ever claim to have the same sequelae that you, was she a target?
That's still a question in my mind, and I still have contact with her. I don't date her much. I don't see a lot of her that way anymore, but she recently, this is a good example of the question you asked. She made some mention of being able to hear music coming out of a box fan.
Oh, yeah.
And I always took that to mean that was a symptom that was almost exclusive to TIs. because I
Right.
started experiencing that decades ago. Very early in my targeting, I started hearing that come, voices and sounds coming out of, riding on top of the noise of a fan or a compressor motor
Some
or
type of repetitive sound. Yeah.
yes, right.
Yeah.
That we could pitch up or down in a sing-song, human-like way.
Let me ask you, this is interesting. So for you, because I know that a lot of targets they've heard everything from repetitive phrases to music. What happened with you?
Music. It started presenting in music, and then it started presenting as voices that were um, essentially in a 3D auroscape. You could position them in your environment, near to far, left to right, front to back. And it's like somebody's throwing a voice, but it's coming out of the fan. It's only enabled by some other noise in your environment. There was a lot of like knocking on the walls. When I spoke of the noise campaign earlier, its most early incarnations of that were in apartment living situations where somebody's rapping on a wall or a ceiling uh, in 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 sync with your movement throughout the apartment.
Oh wow! Tell us about that. That's very interesting.
Well, it's very spooky, and it doesn't. And I'm not unique. This happened very early in my targeting, and it wasn't. It was terrifying at the time because when you have this idea that somebody is watching you and timing the noise that they make to synchronize with whatever your movement is in the apartment. Like if you get up to go pee at 2:00 in the morning, you're going to get somebody, rapping on the ceiling over you while you're taking a leak. And or
So
when you wake up,
how long did you? So that's a lot of
that
targets
went on
talk
for
about that.
oh,
Yeah.
that went on for years. It went on for years.
So
And
every time you did a specific thing, that's when the stimuli came.
right,
Exactly.
yeah. Now this I recognized fairly early on that this was a behavioral operant conditioning type of program. I just happened to be, well, I
So
was
they
in
wanted
sales.
you to anticipate this stuff,
Well,
right?
I was in sales and I was looking for materials on being a more effective salesperson. And I came across the concept of neuro-linguistic programming, which was a branch of psychology in the 70s by these guys, Binder and Grind and Binder. I can't remember these guys' name, but they studied speech and the effect of speech and language on human behavior, specifically around motivation and learning. And much of what I was experiencing seemed to be based in concepts that I was reading about in these books about neuro-linguistic programming. And there were stimuli in the environment that were being attached to different emotional states. They would chase me around. This is after the overt phase of surveillance has started. And they would chase me around town as I'm doing my business, selling my medical devices, and put me in this fear state where I knew that I was, that I was surrounded by these people. And then they would start hammering these stimuli to anchor that fear state to something that was very common in my environment. Somebody opening the trunk of their car, somebody hitting the key fob to lock their door and beep their car, flash a light, or cough. Oh, the cough.
Exponential triggers. Yeah.
Yes, they install these anchors, and then once they're deeply ingrained in you, it does. All they have to do is start firing the trigger off in your environment, and they don't even have to do it anymore. Your environment's going to do it for you because they've chosen
Right.
the most banal, the most obvious things to anchor
Things that are going
your.
to be there anyway. Right?
Absolutely, the color blue is going to be your environment. The color red is going to be in your environment. People who cough, your nurse at the hospital, they're going to cough, or they're going to stare at you, or they're going to do something that people do, but they're going to do it in a way that's going to trigger this fear state. And, you know, they're going to point when you look at them. They're going to crowd you. They're going to act like they're making a phone call with their phone glued to their face and their body oriented, you know, so that the lenses are pointed directly at you. And they're going to have a fake directed conversation about what you had for breakfast that morning. And I mean, this happens. And as skeptical as I was when this first started, I went through years where I was in denial about this. And even though
That's
I knew,
interesting. I want to ask you a question because, I mean, I've mentioned this before that you have targets. It's almost scarier when you're dealing with the thing that you're talking about because you don't know for sure. But if you had someone ever just walk up to you and tell you that they were doing this to you, because I've had that happen to me. Have you ever had that
no,
happen to you?
no, and
Oh,
they're
okay.
unbelievably tight-lipped about it.
Okay.
And I've had weird people approach me, and
They
uh,
haven't made it. They have never made it so obvious. They just walked up and just gotten weird. They've never done that.
well, some of the lower level street people, you know, they employ the homeless people to do some of the street level stuff, and some of the mental state of some of the people who are out there doing the actual street level gang stalking can be problematic. They look unstable and they can act unstable.
But the thing is they sometimes they have information that how are they going to
Right.
have that, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's most of them are afraid they don't want to be a snitch, and they're being compensated for gaslighting you. You know, for doing a hand sign whenever you walk out of the building, or for coughing, or doing or walking in a way to, you know, just for crossing your path, or sticking a cell phone in your face or in your vicinity. I'm convinced that there's an app on there that they're using to read your emotional state. I don't know what they're doing, but they're constantly trying to get their damn phone close to, you know,
Well,
the
yeah, it
target.
was speculatively with the 5G and all this stuff and what they've been designing is that they want to monitor and they can
Yeah,
with these computers
right.
basically
Yeah,
everything.
they'll chase you
Yeah.
around pointing a cell phone at you in a weird way. Um, you know, it's kind of surreptitiously trying to do that in a discreet way. And in other times, they'll just point the damn phone at you and, you know, let you know right out, you know, in front of God and everybody that they're watching you and taking pictures of you and making a video,
Okay, so well, I'm just trying to 26 years is a
It's a
long time.
it's a long
Yeah,
time.
it is, and so your situation without that aggressive stuff is almost more frightening
Look,
because
that's only the years that I've been aware of the targeting. There
people have
had
come
to
up to
be.
me and literally told me what they were doing. They never did that to you. That's horrifying. Because how are you going to
That's got
know?
to be horrifying. I mean, look, have you ever, you know, you don't have to answer this question. It's rhetorical, but I've been on the dating sites. I can't think of a girlfriend that I've had in the last, you know, in a good part of my adult life that didn't happen that happened outside of a website, whether it's Matchcom or Yahoo Personals or whatever it is. My baby mama, I met her online. My most recent girlfriend with the emotional, you know, drinking problems, met her on Tinder. And you don't know what you're going to get, but the experience is overwhelmingly bots or gaslighters, people that are obviously going to gaslight your ass and misrepresent themselves and, you know, try and fake you out and honeypot you. And I had, you know, a couple of them say things that were just like, oh, you're going to get a big surprise. You know, just things come
Okay,
out of
now that's
nowhere.
that's obvious, dude. That's important
Yeah.
because what kind of what and it's a theme too because you heard it multiple times, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they'll come out of the woodwork in some weird way to tip their hat to let you know,
Oh
you
my
know,
God. Yeah.
yeah. The video doorbell is a good example. There's a collection of people that will say something when they walk by. Inevitably, they're going to say something. They're going to cough. They're going to get their little doggy to bark. They're going to stage an argument. They'll do this shit. Excuse my language. For the benefit, for your benefit. I mean, it's like they're acting out these.
They got to get your attention, and then they got once they get you listening within earshot, then they invade. Then they use that other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know what the meta game is always. I don't always understand the overarching method or message that they're conveying, but I guarantee you there's something meta going on in almost every interaction you have with these bots, these NPCs or whatever they are.
You mentioned that. Yeah, go ahead. You mentioned that you had to deal with cancer. Did any of the directed conversations foreshadow that whole thing?
Well, I think no. I'm going to say no because I haven't really. I can't think of a lot of examples of. I mean, I can think of a few specific examples of directed conversations, but they seem rather mundane, and I can't think of any of them that went.
Well, no, that's good because at least you're not jumping to conclusions. At least I know that.
And I'm a naive person in spite of my age.
So you might have been ignoring those things. Okay.
I might have been ignoring a lot of it. And I might have been laboring under the illusion that I was safe under the care of the medical system. But I understand that I'm not. I know from, some more recent experiences that they don't have any mercy. I mean, I had a woman taking pictures of me in my hematologist's lobby, sitting in his lobby. Yeah. And I know she was taking pictures because she forgot to turn her damn flash off. That's how inept some of these people are.
So she's going the flash on. Oh my gosh. She wanted me to notice. There's no way she's that stupid.
It's possible she wanted me to notice. I should have tipped her off. I should have said, hey, if you're going to take pictures of me, remember to turn your flash off next time. But that kind of got me hyper vigilant. I mean, it got me to the point where I started looking around.
Absolutely.
And I realized some of these nurses are in. You gotta understand, these people are embedded in every strata of society, every age, every demographic, every socioeconomic class, every gender, every sexual preference, these people involve their kids in it.
There's no getting away.
You can't. These are, when people say, "Oh no, it's not your neighbors." Bull crap. Read David Lawson's book or Live My Life. It's your flipping neighbors. They are being incentivized. They're being paid. There's some quid pro quo. Their kid is won't get thrown into jail if you just cooperate and tell me when your neighbor is leaving. And, they do the defamation campaign, and pretty soon, 3 or 4 months into your tenancy in your new house or your new apartment, the neighbors are going to start coming out. Every time you walk out of your house or your apartment, there's going to be a neighbor twisting nuts and bolts on his truck or raking leaves, or standing around in some type of Valley of the Dolls Truman Show pose, where you can tell, when these people are not, in your bones. I mean, people, if you're a TI, if you're not being targeted for this, you are, I don't know whether to feel glad for you or sad for you. Because and whether you know it or not, you're probably under the influence of this technology. I don't see how you can escape it. And because I'm sure that I was being influenced for years in a way that I did not perceive, and I was not mentally aware of. Much of this is happening in your subconscious. It's happening when you're asleep. All of this content is being delivered, 24/7. And I mean, it doesn't matter if you don't watch TV. They're going to deliver this. They're going to deliver the content. You're going to get the message. And it's going to contribute to this pastiche, this unbelievable environment, this environmental tyranny that you describe it's pervasive. It's all encompassing. They're omnipresent. They're omniscient. There's no escape. There is only, there's mundane existence. There's a life of, I don't know. You could, I don't honestly know.
Well, what you're describing is the reality of gang stalking, and also, you know, the thing is that there's a blessing within that waking up to that whole thing. But for you to try to go back to this, normal existence, it does seem depressing but really it wasn't there, right?
Yeah, it was all an illusion anyway. So there's no going back. But I
Right.
really did have a lot of good years. I'm a blessed person. I was born with a good brain. I got a decent education. I found a profession and a career that enabled me to grow professionally and emotionally and to feel good about what I was doing. I mean, I really was very blessed. I had a lot of wonderful women in my life. I have a beautiful daughter. I am alone now and I am isolated now, but that doesn't have to, define the rest of my life. I mean,
Right.
I'm counting on recovering from this transplant and feeling better about myself and my environment and my prospects and my health. But, it's hard to be optimistic when they're gang stalking the piss out of you.
Right. It is. And that's part of the gaslighting. It's like somehow it's your problem. But
Yeah, I mean, they want to steal my sunshine. And that's, it's sad. It's it's a sad situation, but I try to be humble and I try to be forgiving. And to the extent that that's a way of being, adopting a Christian-like pose as I walk through this world, I want to try and be generous to my fellow man. It's hard when they're harassing and emotionally and psychologically gaslighting and torturing you to feel that charitable in your heart. But there's no other way to do it. Love is everything.
Okay. Well, no, that's good. So you've explained quite a bit of this whole thing. Interesting that you didn't jump to conclusions, and you processed this information with a very critical criteria, to where you even assumed that maybe you were just naive and weren't paying attention to these things. But some of the obvious things, unavoidably, you noticed those, and you had a very descriptive explanation for some of them, even involved with the speculation of technology, neural monitoring, and other things that you experienced. Even in a lot of targets will talk about those I don't know, the repetitive resonance type of environmental sounds that they seem to use to hijack music or voices or other things, or the vents talking to people. A lot of people talk about that, and it just makes you look crazy. It makes you
Yes,
look insane.
yeah, and you know what? Let me just address that for a moment. Is that watching YouTube videos? I have I don't watch cable TV, but I have a YouTube TV or a Google TV. So all the apps are on there, the Netflix, the YouTube, all that type of stuff. It doesn't matter. I can watch YouTube on my laptop or my smartphone or whatever, but they can degrade and inject and overlay the audio stream and the video stream to corrupt the images and the audio of whatever content you are watching and consuming. I
Yeah,
guarantee you that is happening.
yeah.
And that the audio is being inserted and overlaid on top of the narration or the music or whatever YouTube video you're working on. It doesn't matter what its source is. This technology is so invasive. They can just overlay it on whatever you're listening to or watching. So they can corrupt the content. They can insert whatever subliminal computer generated content they want. There's nothing that is not unadulterated. Everything has been compromised, and you can hear it. You can hear the artifacts in the audio. I'm a music guy. I played music, I play guitar and sing in bands as a solo singer songwriter for many, many, many years. And so I'm attuned to audio. I have a wonderful playback system with, big ass JBLs and 100-watt, amplifier. And I know when audio is corrupted, and you can hear this, like an artificial digital artifact that is being overlaid in and inserted into the content streams of every popular video you can watch on YouTube, regardless of the nature of content, regardless of the source. They can simply deliver that content to you, and it corrupts it. They can corrupt anything.
And that technology's probably been out there for way, way longer than
it probably has.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably has. And so, God knows what you're actually getting compared
Right.
to what you think you're consuming. And young people nowadays, I feel, I worry about my daughter. She's on Instagram, she's on social media, and it's just, I think the technology has evolved to the point where these smartphone devices are nothing more than surveillance and data collection devices.
Well,
And that
yeah, they planned that out a long time ago. I mean,
yeah,
they had to.
they've been collecting data on us for so long and so completely that there's probably an alter of us that exists in a different
The
multiverse.
digital twin, right?
Yeah, I do believe that in that. I think that theory is quite possibly not a theory, just because of the subjective experience of having, it's like having my mind read or my personality basically ripped out of me, or being joined by a bunch of, kind of holographic phantoms that are racing around the place. It's it's terrifying.
Well, yeah, they're trying to manipulate you and reprogram you at the same time.
Yeah, and they're doing a bang up job of it. It's very hard for a mind. There's no firewall. The brain doesn't have a firewall that can stop this shit. It's
Well, you use the for you and for a lot of the other targets, as long as you recognize the manipulation and the patterns and the themes, that's kind of the whole point. You can see what's happening. So at first, like you said, there's no firewall. You're subjected to the stimuli, but you can reprocess that according to that framework, right?
yes. In terms of what you knew, I mean, everything I knew about the way the world worked at a certain point got turned upside down by this. And so that's a very disorienting phenomenon to happen. And it takes a while to kind of reorient yourself to the idea that this new paradigm exists. It's, like a Neo in the Matrix type of thing, waking up and deciding to, take the blue pill or the red pill or whichever one he takes. I can never remember.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're red pilled if you don't want to wake up.
No, I mean, I know I know it when I see it. I know I'm looking at it right in the face. And you're not going to tell me that I'm not seeing or feeling or experiencing what I'm experiencing. I certainly am. I can't make somebody else see it. I mean, I tried that with the girlfriend, and I haven't heard from her for a couple of weeks.
Unfortunately, right. So your experience of now, how long were you having a relationship before you opened up and expressed that? Hello? Are you there? Hmm. We lost William? Hello? William, are you out there? Can you hear me?
I'm still here. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you now. Go ahead and answer that question.
What was the question? I'm sorry, I might have missed it.
You said that you tried to explain this to someone that you were trying to have a relationship with, but you haven't heard from them. How long were you with them before you expressed that, and was it immediate after you expressed the truth about your scenario that they disappeared?
We dated for about a year before I felt comfortable enough to explain my experience to her. And she's of a certain age. We're both the same age, and and experience and temperament that I thought that she would be it would be safe to go to her and tell her what was happening. And she was somewhat nonplussed and ambivalent about it when I mentioned it to her. And I didn't press the issue. And then recently, when this campaign kind of stepped up in my immediate local environment about a month and a half ago, that's when I opened up to her again about what was happening and tried to show her what this is and how it works and explain it to her. And I was unsuccessful in my attempt to do that.
Oh,
And
that's horrible. And yeah, that's because you knew that there was a risk.
oh,
You
sure,
know,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm sad about it, and I don't blame her. I do love her, and in spite of all
But
of
so she hadn't contacted you at all. It's
no,
just she
well, she
just.
did. She did to ask where I had to borrow money from her to pay a medical bill. So I was I forgot to make my payment on the 3rd. So I heard from her this morning.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's not. So you guys were intimate, though. You were close, and
Oh
then
yeah,
you opened yourself up, made yourself vulnerable. That's horrible. And then
yeah.
is this there was a silent period? What happened?
She just she's I didn't I was ready for it. I steeled myself for what was probably going to happen when I opened my yap about all this. And and I owe it. I have to take responsibility for probably my part in it because I got frustrated very quickly when she couldn't or wouldn't, look and see and listen. And we had to overcome some technical hurdles. She doesn't live nearby. It's kind of a long distance relationship. She comes into town every few weeks or so. Um, but we had to overcome some technical hurdles. She wasn't able to actually watch the video that I was trying to, create. My computer's glitching out. I'm having a hard time actually making a stupid video. But at least I found a way to occupy myself in my retirement by learning how to use a video editor and make a decent video. So I'm still kind of working on it, and I haven't given up hope on her. She's a good person, and I would love to have her in my life. In some role besides a creditor for my medical debt.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well,
I've been very lucky in love, and I don't know how many of them are honeypots. I could think of a few of them in my recent, adult history that probably are questionable in terms of where they came from and what their motivations were. But again, I'm naive, and I'm kind of kind of a hopeless romantic in some way. Keep hoping that there's going to be somebody true and right and real out there. But this system really does degrade your faith and will just devastate your estimation of the humanity of your fellow citizens. It really will contribute to a negative view that you have of humanity. And that's a tough price to pay for somebody who has tried to walk through life in a way that assumes that the people in my life have nothing except good intentions and that they, have love in their heart for, their fellow man and some kind of empathy and some kind of compassion, and to wake up to the idea that I live in a world where people can be incentivized for people I don't know. I mean, I don't know any of these people. I have failed in my ability to plug into any kind of community here. And I'm not being incentivized to join any kind of community here, given the behavior of some of my neighbors, when I step out the door. So that's a sad thing for me is to understand that, you're just beating your head up against the wall over a period of years, assuming that people are, have your best interests at heart, and people are generally good, and they just want to be left alone to raise their family and love their kids and, not starve and have to work 3 jobs. But I don't think that's the world we live in anymore.
Right. It never was. And that's the conceptual framework flip. And it's, like you said, there are people out there that have no idea. And so when you try and tell them this, that for their own protection and their own mental, the stability and sanity, they cannot accept what you're saying. And so that's the, I don't know, I guess that's the defense mechanism against individuals waking up to what you know.
Yeah, nobody wants to wake up and realize that they're living on a prison planet, and that their options are limited, that their potential is being suppressed, that their very identity is being crushed by this machine, and that their future is bereft of any type of hope or aspiration to elevate your spirits and enjoy your health and your life and your freedom and your liberty. That this system of oppression that a targeted individual lives under, and there are many of us. I am not alone. And that's one of the only reasons I'm probably still here, is because I understood. I became aware a while ago that there are many of us out there, and that I'm not alone. I'm not the only person being sensitized to a color or a behavior or an action or a hand sign. I'm not alone. And that gives me a little bit of hope, because there is somebody on my side. There are others on my side of the line. I'm worried about our ability to overcome and defeat this technology and this menace. But I'm skeptical, because it looks to me like they're in control. It looks to me like they can change my local environment up in a heartbeat. They are embedded in local businesses, in corporate and government institutions, law enforcement, emergency services, education, healthcare, finance. There's no place that you can walk in my neighborhood and not encounter somebody or somebody who's been corrupted. There's no way to navigate a path through any of it without coming into close contact with somebody that wishes you ill and is doing, the job of a satanic minion to mess with your vibe and to take pleasure in doing it.
Right.
It's crazy, but I have to tell you, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while, and I'm glad I did. I can't think of much more to say that I haven't covered.
No, you've done a great job. You've experienced the environmental tyranny of something that, and we already talked about that, where you speculated that it's neural monitoring, and you've looked into the Stasi techniques and some of those other things that are going on, along with the problem of evil and the satanic nature of this whole thing. And that's one of the things that has split a lot of the people out there, which of course I've mentioned before, that technology comes from them. And of course, when you're dealing with harassment, whether it be the things that you're talking about, where you have these, type of repetitive, type of resonance stimuli, where the all of a sudden, and a lot of targets talk about that, even to the point where it's air conditioners or fans or some other type of frequency resonance type of device, where they'll use and kind of hijack that along with it. And I don't even know, because we're all speculative. We don't know the technology that they have, but that's a theme and that's a pattern. It's not by coincidence that all these targets are talking about the same thing you're talking about, right? It can't be.
I don't think it's a coincidence at all. And that over time, with enough, you just do the pattern recognition. If you're subjected to this enough times to the point where the pattern becomes pretty obvious, I just look at the way that consensus seems to be building among people other people whose opinions I respect, people like you, and other people who shall remain unnamed. There does seem to be a fair amount of consensus building around some of these technologies, and in a sometimes desperate attempt for a TI to make sense of the symptomology, they can hardly be blamed for looking to some of the more exotic explanations for why they are hearing things, seeing things, feeling things, and experiencing things that are not part of a quote unquote normal objective experience for most other people. It's a different environment that is really, different subjectively than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And there is no going back that I can
Right.
see.
Right.
I would love to go back to the times when I was, unaware, or to the time where I would have been a skeptic. If somebody came to me and said they were being gang stalked and described these crazy symptoms, that, if I were to go back to the days when I would have not believed them, then I would have been somebody who was asleep. I would not have been woke like I was woke 26 years ago.
Right. No,
So,
that's a good point, because it that's one of the effects of the environmental tyranny around targeted individuals. Is like, one of the things that I've caught myself thinking about is when I see someone like that, is they have no idea, and they may never know, but that's not true. They're going to find out eventually. They are going to find out eventually, and that's the thing. That a lot of targets are wondering about, especially people who've been discredited, or they've been then marginalized or silenced or bastardized in their reputation, is that it looks like that now, and it sucks, because you're right. You look around and you see these people. It's like it's almost like you envy their oblivion, because at least they're.
My girlfriend's a good example, but at the same time, I worry about her. It's like this invasion of the body snatchers type of thing that's happening. I mean, it really is. I mean, that movie is a great analogy for what is happening.
It's almost like they're telling us about this stuff and just making movies.
That's right. They are. The Truman Show, Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Right.
There's a laundry list.
The movie Fallen, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yep. They Live is another good example.
Right.
Of a
That's
movie.
that's a great one there. Yeah.
The Matrix, The 13th Floor. There are so many films that portray the life of a targeted individual. And I'm old school. I remember Patrick McGoohan in The Prisoner, just waking up in an environment that seems kind of normal, but realizing that there's no way out of this place. And, but whatever the analogy is, I mean, there's no going back to the days when I was, Truman wakes up in a sunshiny, beautiful world with cheery neighbors, and he goes, there's no going back to that. It's sad. I miss it. I worry about my child. I worry about my daughter, and I don't know where she is with all of this. She's unaware. I think she's vaguely aware that her dad, subscribes.
Not everybody gets the treatment, though, and for them, they may never know. They can't do it to everybody, because if they did, it wouldn't work.
Right. Yeah, and I pray for her to be safe and make good decisions and be discerning in terms of the people that she lets into her life. I mean, I made some mistakes when I was younger in terms of, inviting some people into my life whose best interests and backgrounds were not very well aligned with my best interests. And it's, but that was my own discernment or my own lack thereof. So I just hope that my daughter, I'd love to be able to save her from some of the tiger traps and the pitfalls that are out there.
Without exposing her to the trauma. Many. That's the trick, Because if people aren't experiencing it, it's like some people have asked me, should I tell my kids about it? And I say, don't do that, because unless they've experienced it, you make them aware of the corruption that's out there in a way that's not going to traumatize them. But you don't tell them that, who knows what's going to, it's really a tricky question. Because, like I said, not everybody experiences this. It's almost,
that's a fine line to walk.
Yeah. Because if you haven't been targeted, they're not going to, it's like there's rules, and I've talked about even some of the foreplay that targets deal with. It's like, they say something to you and it's like other people chime in, well, it's not time for you to do that to them yet. And it's like, what? And everything just goes back to normal. And some targets deal with that. It's like, what the hell was that? You don't remember it until after the whole thing goes avert. But as far as, other individuals in society, they may never, until the end of this whole thing, they may never experience any of that stuff at all.
Yeah, it's just, I wonder how much longer this can operate under this veil of secrecy. It's just so, impressive how insidious this all is, and the way that it's designed to evade.
Oh yeah, they'll obfuscate it like they do all the other stuff by, it's like the Epstein files now, they're mingling it in with the flood technique, with all these things that people are questioning whether it's even possible or not. With satanic rituals and all these other weird things like cannibalism and jerky and everything. It's like, and so some of the individuals out there they turned the whole thing off. Because at this point,
it's hard to blame them. I mean, because that's been an overload. I mean, to wake up one day and realize that there's pretty good evidence that your entire world is being run by a coven of satanic, pedophilic.
Exactly.
They
don't want to know. They don't want to know something like that. Yeah.
What more evidence do you need of how corrupted the world actually is? If you don't understand it at this point, then you're never going to understand why I'm taking a crap because somebody's pointing and making hand signs whenever I walk out the door.
Right. It's a flood technique. It's a demoralization technique to the point where, and then you have all the other distractions. Aliens are coming, or this is, it's one thing to the next. And it's like we all have ADD along with the technology that is influencing us with, even, a light flicker on the TV that started out. And then, and now we've got phones and we've got 5G. Who knows what the hell is influencing people at this point? And we're just trying to get through the day because now we've gotten rid of the middle class to where, at least for me, it's like, if I don't work every day, I can't survive. I'm so busy. I can't hardly do these things. I have to stay up in the middle of the night to do it.
No, I was raised in the era of relative prosperity, kind of the post-war baby boom. Technically a boomer, but more Generation Jones. But when I got out of graduate school under Bill Clinton in 1990, jobs were plentiful. The middle class still existed.
Yeah,
you didn't have to knock yourself out to earn a decent living and have a decent place to live. And I don't think that my standard of living certainly improved after that when I got into the medical device business. But when I look at what's happened to real wages for average Americans since 1985 or so, it hasn't kept up with GDP at all. It's gone nowhere. I mean, the middle class has been decimated in this country. And the money is now concentrated in the hands of very few, insane cash hoarding multi-billionaires. And there's real suffering out here. And the people that we're looking to alleviate that suffering are nothing more than satanic, pedophilic, narcissistic, psychopathic.
Yeah, you see the hierarchy, you see the mechanism. And have you heard about that facility they're talking about building out in Utah for people who are homeless?
No, but it doesn't surprise me that kind of talk is being bandied about in the corridors of power, because If they could just wave a magic wand and flush all the homeless people down the toilet, that would suit them fine. They absolutely do not care, do not believe in redemption or the power of love or the power of Christ or anything like that. They are non-believers. They're Luciferian. They're Satanists. They're straight up, raping and murdering kids and getting away with it. Nobody gives a damn. Nobody's going to do anything about it.
There are a lot of people who care, but the thing is they've created this infrastructure that obfuscates what's going on. And when you get into that whole thing, that was more of an op. That was a CIA op. So the redaction of a lot of that stuff is is based on culpability, which of course you gotta hide that, right?
Yeah, we got to protect all the perpetrators, out the victims, and start a war.
Well, yeah, they want to manipulate people emotionally, and then they want to use that flood technique to obfuscate what's really going on, because it's just about corruption. It's about entrapment, and it's about using covert methodologies to mind control individuals and get rid of the middle class and create a hierarchy. Right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that will change under any administration at this point, because it's been ongoing.
It's an illusion at this point.
It's an illusion. I mean, your leaders, I don't care what side of the fence you're on, have all been co-opted. None of them have your best interests at heart, and there's no choice. There's the tyranny of choice. There's the tyranny of an illusion of choice that you are operating.
That's like the Matrix, when the Oracle shows up and she's like, "You got to make a choice, Neo." She was put in there to create the illusion of choice, right? And then, of course, when Smith came along and absorbed her, of course, her DNA was within him, which he turned into a virus, and then went after Neo, and then they could eradicate Smith, right? So the whole thing was a setup,
Yes, and that's why I think that this idea of remote neural monitoring and the hive mind, the brain to computer interlink and the brain to brain computer interlink, and the whole theme of transhumanism and all of that stuff, I don't think that that's as far-fetched as people would like to believe. I don't think anybody is safe. I think the entire population of the world is being consumed by this. And I don't know that there's any way out.
Well, there's a way out. I mean, like I said, at least for me, this whole thing is going to be over probably within the next 50 years, unless I'm wrong. And the delusion of the elite that this is going to keep going, and there's going to be a type of further evolution for human beings with transhumanism. I don't believe that. I think it's going to come to an end. And I think that, the proof is that they're using this stuff to weaponize and control people. And this whole idea of reducing the population and, creating a hierarchy is, within the framework of eugenics has always been there. And but what they want to do is create slaves, and so they're trying to mix morality with this whole thing. But the thing that they're denying is the biblical prophecy involved, and the fact that you can't do that. You can't do those things and be realistic. And as far as the technology and all these things that are out there, the control and everything. Like you said earlier, people are figuring this stuff out already. So what's your point?
Well, I'm not sure that I have one other than...
not you. Now, what's their point? The people already know what they're doing.
Yeah, this social, it's social engineering or re-engineering.
There's a lot of whistleblowers. Yeah, there's a lot of people who they've already blown the whistle on them, And it's like, well, how long can you keep this a secret? It's like the fiat currency. How long is that going to be good? I mean, it's going to cave in eventually. What's your point, right?
Good. That's a good question. Like I said, there are enough distractions. I mean, I have my own. I love to
They're
play
trying
my
to write
guitar.
it
I love
out.
to watch a good tennis match on
Yeah,
TV.
it's a desperate attempt to make it last just another day or another week or another decade or whatever. It's already over, at least from what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I hope that we come to some type of awakening here. On that there's some type of groundswell or basis of awareness and for what's actually happening right in front of everybody's nose. It's just it's only a matter of time. I don't know that I'm going to outlive, that I'm going to be around to see it, but I've certainly seen enough at this point to draw my own conclusions about what's happening. And I don't want to be gaslighted and told that I shouldn't trust my own eyes and ears at this point, even though I know I'm being deceived and that my senses can be hijacked. I understand. I can tell the difference between me and you still. I don't know if that makes sense. But I
No,
like to
yeah. Well, so you've described a lot of things, and you've talked about your experience. I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate your input, and you've illustrated the patterns and the themes that are involved in this whole thing, and the inevitable end of it, really.
Well,
And
thank you,
how
Doctor,
this,
for the
yeah.
thank you for the conversation, and thank you for being an advocate for targeted individuals and for being brave and being consistent and being available and putting yourself out there. I mad respect for that.
Oh well, I appreciate that very much. Would you like to say anything before I take you off the stage?
No, except that if you are experiencing any of the types of symptoms that would lead you to believe or suspect that you've been targeted for this technology, just know that you're not alone and that there are places that you can go and find resources and people who seem to be trustworthy to me. And your show's a good example of that. So, bless your heart and thank you, Doctor. I appreciate you very
Oh,
much.
thank you very much, William. I'm going to take you off the stage now. And that was a great testimony. A lot of things illustrated within that. A 26-year veteran of gang stalking, dealing with environmental tyranny involving directed conversations, noise campaigns, uh, honeypots, and the thing that targets are often faced with is the themes and the patterns involved in this, and recognizing the motive and recognizing the science around the gang stalking, around the organized stalking and harassment, and the gaslighting involved in that to take you into sensitization and to take you into propositional tyranny according to the way that you process information that they give you according to their schematic. And they use that to reprogram targets, to control their emotions, to control the trajectory of their thought patterns, to inject things even described in MK Ultra involving psychic driving to where things are bouncing around in their minds, to use technology to infiltrate their psyche, or even a combination of the spiritual dimension and technology, because that is basically hopelessly interconnected, and that individuals are dealing with a menagerie of environmental tyranny that involves these themes and patterns. And I've mentioned before that you deal with a lot of illusions. They want you to think things so that they can accuse you of believing their lies, or that they can reprogram you and make you internalize the abuse and the gaslighting. Some targets deal with the whole idea that this is just to help them, and it seems easier to palate because their family members have turned against them, their friends have turned against them. It seems as though the world is not what they thought it was, and it violates everything within their conceptual framework, and it's difficult, and that fuels the gaslighting. It is part of the mechanism. It is part of the themes and the patterns that targeted individuals deal with. The street theater, the directed conversations. Our guest talked about the sign language and other things, the behavioral patterns involved in triggering that target, the environmental subjection that is there to manipulate, to corrupt, and indoctrinate individuals who are subjected to that tyranny, even to the point where they believe that maybe they have lost their mind, maybe they are mentally ill. And one of the things that the William talked about was that, you know, he was very honest about how he was processing the information, and some of the things weren't as obvious as what I've experienced and other targets that I've talked to, where they'll just seriously just walk up and tell you what they're going to do. They'll become aggressive. It'll become overt. And it's almost more frightening when you see a subtle version of this harassment with the longevity of a 26-year campaign. Take note of that. Don't underestimate what this guy's talking about. And I've mentioned that before. When it comes to the gaslighting and the environmental subjection that targets deal with, whether it's aggressive or whether it's subtle, that they will flip back and forth, that they will try to convince you that you're reading into things, that you are overreacting, hiding behind the plausible deniability of that methodology and scientific equation. I'd like to thank everyone for coming in. I'd like to thank everyone for helping support me and the channel. God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.